122 days, 4 months, 13,000 hours, 1,400 people, and 1,100 flights taken, involving the FBI, the United States Special Force, the Red Cross, and anyone you can think of. And yet no one could find this one small child. This is a sad tale of how a boy who just wanted to make his parents laugh ended up missing for 55 years. And the horrifying thing is that he's still missing. This is the unfortunate true story of Dennis Martin. It was Father's Day weekend in 1969, and the Martin family decided to spend the holiday on a camping trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. In fact, this was a tradition for the Martins, who had family reunions here every summer, but this was the first time they were joined by 6-year-old Dennis Martin. The family hiked from Cades Cove to Russell Field and camped overnight. The next day, they hiked to Spence Field near the Appalachian Trail, where they intended to spend the night. The Martin family, which consisted of their dad and grandfather, decided to set up their camp in Spence Field on the afternoon of June 14th, 1969. The kids at camp were Dennis, his older brother Doug, and 2 boys from another family. They were playing, and during the course of their fun activity, they decided to play a prank on the adults and then jump out at their parents to scare them. Because of the clothes he was wearing, it was agreed by everyone in the group that Dennis, who was wearing a bright red shirt and green shorts, should hide by himself away from them so as not to give out their location, while the other 3 stayed together. When Dennis's dad, William Martin, last saw him, his son was leaving the path to hide behind a bush. So in a way, the adults already knew of their plan. A few minutes later, Doug and his friends jumped out at the adults. The adults played along and acted to be surprised as they laughed, but Dennis didn't come out. It was nothing at first, but seconds were turning into minutes, and Dennis had still not shown up. Now his father was getting worried. 5 minutes had gone by, and Dennis hadn't come out yet, so he went into the forest to look for him. He ran down the trail for almost 2 miles, yelling out for his son the whole time, but he never saw or heard Dennis. Soon after, they told the park rangers that their son was missing. The area where Dennis disappeared is marked by steep slopes and ravines. A variety of wild animals, including bears, feral swine, bobcats, and copperhead snakes, inhabit the region. But it was too early to assume the kid was killed by a wild animal. The adults kept searching for Dennis, shouting out his name, but no response. Then the worst thing that could happen during a search happened. It rained. It wasn't a light shower, but a heavy downpour that dropped 3 inches of rain in a matter of hours, causing streams to flood. It rained so much that the temperature on the night of June 14th dropped to nearly 10 degrees Celsius. The storm was so vicious that people there at the shelter had trouble even lighting a fire. But it was especially bad for the search for Dennis. Why was this bad? Well, that's because the heavy downpour washed out any trails or markings that Dennis might have left behind, which made finding him extremely hard. The park rangers were involved, and throughout the stormy night, the family and rangers conducted a thorough search of the immediate area as much as they could, but they were unable to locate anything that pointed to where Dennis could be. Dennis's grandfather, Clyde Martin, hiked 6 miles to Cades Cove on Saturday and informed the officers about his missing grandson. Clyde then hiked several miles back up the footpaths to Spence Field in search of his grandson, asking anyone he saw on the way if they'd seen Dennis. But he was unsuccessful in his search. The heavy mist that occurred the next couple of days also hampered efforts. The family had tried, and the park rangers as well, but with no result. It was time to involve anyone and everyone that could help. So, an extensive search was now launched, with National Park Service personnel supplemented by National Guard troops and even Green Berets. That meant that the United States Special Forces were also included in this search, about 71 of them at least. Then you also had volunteers, the Red Cross, Boy Scouts, firefighters, sniffer dogs, and so many others that it made a long list. About 1,400 people looked for this kid. 1,110 helicopter sorties were flown, and yet they still couldn't find him. Then, one day, they got a big lead in their search. They found foot tracks of a child that kind of matched Dennis's description, but because there were a lot of people actively looking for Dennis, they thought the tracks belonged to one of the Boy Scouts helping with the search. But tons of hours later, it was discovered that those tracks were said to have come from a child who was missing one shoe, which disappeared on the banks of a stream, which meant that the tracks they found could have been Dennis Martin. This theory was supported when they found a shoe and sock that matched the foot track 3 days later. This spurred everyone to keep looking for him, thinking maybe he was close by. The news and all sorts of media covered the event, asking for any information. Dennis's father offered a reward of $5,000 to anyone who had information about his son's whereabouts. That's about $41,543 today. Instead of helpful leads, what the family got was a number of calls from psychics claiming to know where he was, and even though all these leads were investigated, it never led to a breakthrough. For example, a prediction came through the headquarters dispatcher from someone stating that the boy would be found, quote, 5 miles southeast from an area last seen on a stream by a waterfall, and that white pine trees are in the area. The person who phoned this prediction in got this prediction from a dream. According to her, quote, her dreams of this nature had come true before, so she believed there was a high chance she was right about this again. One psychic from Los Angeles called in to say he had seen the boy 2.5 miles to the left of where he was last seen by his father or brother, and that Dennis had fallen off a steep area and was hung up in the bushes, but was alive. Another psychic from New Orleans said authorities should stop looking on the ground and start looking up in trees and treetops to find Dennis. In total, there were dozens of calls from psychics who were convinced they had answers that could lead to Dennis. And to leave no stone unturned, the team leaders followed up on every call they got. But sadly, every call led to a dead end. A total of 56 square miles of land had been searched thoroughly by the 22nd of June. For reference, that's about 300,000 basketball courts. Helicopters began transporting search crews from Cades Cove to the mountaintop, but fog frequently kept them grounded. Despite all this manpower and 2 weeks of official searching and unofficial searching, nothing was ever found. The only thing found was the shoe print I mentioned earlier, but it was uncertain whether it belonged to Dennis given all the foot traffic from searchers in the area. The search was abandoned on June 29th, but some people were still searching unofficially until all search was officially closed down on September 14th, 1969. It still remains the largest search that has ever been conducted in the history of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. There was a total cost of $50,000 for the search, which, if you adjust for inflation, was about $415,000 in today's money. That's how serious the search for Dennis Martin was. As the days passed by, it became increasingly obvious that the child would not be discovered alive. So after a week of searching, the National Park Service put together a plan for what they would do in the event that they were successful in locating Dennis's body. And I see the reason for that. This was a child, all alone in a vast forest, coupled with the rain and weather. A trained adult would still have a problem with these factors, let alone a kid. So they were thinking, instead of looking for Dennis, let's look for his body. At least something for the parents to bury and help them move on. At this stage, a lot of people were confused. How did a kid go missing that easily? And despite the extensive search from numerous agencies, nothing was found. This brought about some theories of why Dennis was never found. The first theory was that he was probably attacked by a hungry bear or a wild pig. And to be fair, the Great Smoky Mountains is filled with a lot of wild animals. But here's the thing, and to show how very extensive the search was, every animal dropping, that's, their poop, was thoroughly checked for bones, just in case the worst happened. Still, nothing that could prove Dennis was eaten was found. Heck, toilet pits at trail shelters and fires were checked, buzzards were watched, all with no trace of young Dennis Martin. When I say everything, I mean everything was checked. I was really impressed with how thorough this search was, actually. Now, the second theory was that Dennis was kidnapped and carried away from the park by someone. His father believed in this theory more, and he had a good reason for it. So, it turns out that someone heard a boy scream that very afternoon when Dennis went missing. A tourist by the name of Harold Key said he and his family heard an, quote, enormous, sickening scream that afternoon. Shortly after hearing the scream, they saw a man who appeared to be untidy, shaggy, and rough, running up the trail near the location where the scream had come from. In addition to this, Harold also said that the man with the shaggy hair was holding, quote, cloth or clothing over his waist, and there was a piece of paper found on the ground that included a map that had been sketched by hand. Harold Key asserts that his sighting took place approximately 1 hour after Dennis Martin went missing and was only 7 miles away from the location where the incident took place. This was a great lead for investigators and was how the FBI finally got involved. You see, earlier, Dennis's father had tried to bring the FBI on board to help with the search, but this was their reply. In simple words, unless foul play was detected, it was out of their hands. But now that a tourist had brought up this statement of a possible kidnapping, the FBI has no choice but to assist in the search of Dennis from a kidnapping aspect. So the FBI looked into this claim and investigated it, but it turns out it was another dead end. The park rangers and the FBI concluded that there was not enough evidence to establish a connection between the sighting and Dennis's disappearance. This was especially true when considering the fact that Harold's sighting occurred approximately 5 miles away from the location where Dennis vanished. The exact time of the sighting was unknown, and there were no trails connecting the two locations. Because the authorities concluded that the youngster could not have traveled that far on foot in such a short amount of time, they ruled out the possibility that the horrifying scream and the bizarre sighting had anything to do with Dennis's disappearance. The FBI also looked into the Martin family background to see if anyone had skeletons in their cupboard that could result in having dangerous enemies, who in retaliation could have kidnapped the boy to hurt the family. But once again, they found nothing. No one connected to the family appeared suspicious enough to warrant an enemy or an investigation, which led the FBI and the Martins back to the Smokies where Dennis got lost. In late 2022, the FBI finally made their files on Dennis's case available to the public after years of persistently refusing to comply with Freedom of Information Act requests made by a number of individuals, including Michael Bouchard, the author of The Disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin, lost in the Great Smoky Mountains. So, what was learned from these 133 pages of documentation? According to the documents, Dennis's father, William Martin, made numerous requests to the FBI to investigate his son's disappearance. However, like I said earlier, he was told on numerous occasions that the FBI does not have jurisdiction over Denny's case because there was no concrete evidence that a crime had been committed. Due to this rationale, they acted more as observers than they did as detectives. The document also suggests that the FBI agents believed that William Martin's mental health later suffered severely as a result of the loss of his kid. This made him vulnerable to claims of psychics and stories about feral people living in the park. Now, despite Harold's statement being disproved, the FBI was still looking at the case, especially from the angle of kidnapping. 10 years later, a person of interest in the investigation was finally identified, and if we were to go by this person's testimony, that would mean Dennis's dad was right all along and that Dennis was kidnapped. An interview with a confidential informant was conducted by FBI agents on November 16, 1978. This informant told a frightening narrative, stating that a former cellmate had confessed to him that he had kidnapped a boy named Dennis Martin from the Great Smoky Mountains and then sold him to another man. The agents, who were not familiar with Dennis's case, started looking into it and came to the conclusion that the information provided by the informant was a good fit for what was already known regarding the disappearance of the boy. Having only Dennis's last name to work with, they started looking for the person who was allegedly responsible for kidnapping Dennis. They were under the impression that they might be onto something significant. They were successful in locating a person whom they believed to be the same individual, and they were able to acquire a photograph of him. When they showed the photograph to their informant, he confirmed that this was the same cellmate who had confessed to kidnapping Dennis Martin. 2 years later, in the year 1980, the agents were able to locate the prime suspect, asking him if he had any knowledge relating to Dennis Martin's disappearance and if he had indeed kidnapped the boy. But the suspect denied the allegation, explaining that the informant had fabricated the story to cause trouble for him because the two disliked each other. The suspect, for his part, made the offer to submit himself to a polygraph examination in order to demonstrate that he was telling the truth. However, it isn't clear if the agents ever took him up on this offer. With nothing solid to connect the suspect to Dennis's disappearance, they felt that they could go no further in pursuing this lead, ending their investigation into Dennis's disappearance for good. So, what happened to Dennis? Well, some people think that because of the heavy rains that followed Dennis's disappearance, the missing boy could have died of exposure after becoming lost in the wilderness. They also believed that his body had been washed away, possibly into a crevasse, which made it extremely difficult to locate him. You see, the Great Smoky Mountain isn't just any mountain. It's a challenging and unforgiving environment. The Smoky Mountains are ranked as the third most dangerous national park in the United States. There are steep slopes, jagged rocks, and deep crevices packed into the highlands of the Smoky Highlands, which are absolutely stunning, but also dangerous. Also, a number of factors, including thirst, hunger, or even a fall into a violent creek could have resulted in the death of the little youngster. And even if he had managed to somehow miraculously survive the terrain, we still have the weather from that period to consider. Dennis, who was only 6 years old at the time, was not prepared to handle the turbulent elements that the searchers were experiencing, even if he had been able to navigate the treacherous terrain. When Dennis left his brother, he was wearing nothing but a t-shirt and shorts, which was obviously an insufficient ensemble for the temperatures that had plummeted into the low 10s. The chilly and wet environment would have rendered Dennis extremely prone to hypothermia, which is a hazardous medical condition in which the body loses heat quicker than it can produce it. Because Dennis didn't have any protection from the rain, he was most likely to suffer from this condition. Children lose heat at a higher rate than adults do, and situations that are moist make it extremely difficult to restore the warmth that they've lost. To prevent himself from becoming hypothermic, Dennis would have needed to locate or construct a shelter that would keep him dry while also providing him with a source of heat. In the event that Dennis did go hypothermic, his chances of life would be extremely low because of no medical attention. Even under the most favorable of conditions, it would have been challenging to achieve survival. In the light of the storm, the low temperatures, and the length of time that Dennis was absent, it was possible that he would have perished from exposure if he'd taken the wrong way. But what puzzled people till now is that no trace was ever discovered. Nothing at all. And that seems almost impossible. But then again, Dennis isn't the only one who's gone missing just by visiting the Smoky Mountains. Lots of people have gone missing in the Smoky Mountains, and by people, I mean adults, experienced people. Yet, one wrong turn, and it's all over. Take, for example, Thelma Pauline Melton, who was reported missing on September 25th, 1981. Melton was 58 at the time of her disappearance, and was hiking near Deep Creek Campground with two friends when she went out ahead of them and disappeared. The crazy thing is that just like the Martin family who were familiar with the Smoky Mountains, Melton was also familiar with the trail, having hiked it many times before, and yet she went missing. The only good thing about the Dennis Martin case was how it changed how we search for missing people. Prior to the arrival of Dennis Martin, people were not familiar with search and rescue procedures that were very disciplined. So people went out into the woods and did all in their power to find him wherever they could. I mean, it's one kid against 1,000, how hard can it be? But this method of approach ended up doing more harm than good. They didn't truly have a methodical and practical approach to addressing the question of where he might be. Like, the footprints that were found, no one could ascertain if it belonged to Dennis or not, and when they were finally able to reach a conclusion, 3 days had passed. Things like that made the search hard, to say the least. After further inspection, park officials agreed that it was a mistake to send out such a large number of searchers who lacked experience at such an early stage in the investigation. Even the scent-trained bloodhounds that were given were unable to be utilized by the investigators because the landscape was so densely contaminated by searchers. The search was further hampered by the weather conditions, which made it difficult for rangers and searchers to navigate their way to Spence Field due to the presence of flooded streams and roads that had been washed out. Not only have there been no new clues or advancements in this investigation as of yet, but the Martin family has also refrained from making any public statements on his disappearance ever since the search was formally concluded in 1969. I just think it's possibly the saddest thing that William Martin passed away without ever knowing what happened to his son.